Welcome to the Drilling Deeper webinar. I'm John Forwood, Chief Investment Officer of the Lowell Resources Fund, and it's great to be here today to drill deeper into the how and why of company making discoveries. And we're especially privileged to welcome our esteemed guest, one of Lowell Resources Fund's favourite geos, and one who has made probably more money for LRT unit holders than any other geologist, the legendary explorationist Tony Rovira. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before asking Tony to give us some background and talk a little bit about his career, just go through why we're actually holding these Drilling Deeper Lodestar webinars. We believe at Lowell that there's very few better ways to make huge and rapid profits than when investing in a major mineral discovery by a junior company. So we want to get as many insights as we can into what creates a big discovery and what tips investors can use to get behind the next one. We think the junior resources sector is one of the best places to do this. So we want to shed some light on some of the remarkable stories of discovery and share knowledge to further industry connection and learning. Ultimately, we aim to demonstrate that investment in junior mining and resources can be super profitable. So we'll kick off in a sec, but first a few bits of housekeeping. Importantly, nothing we say in this webinar should be taken as investment advice. Please do your own research and get professional advice where needed. Tony, I won't go through your entire illustrious career, but just a couple of highlights by way of intro. So Tony is a geologist with a 40-year career as an exploration and mine geo and as a company exec. With Azure Minerals, he won last year's Diggers and Dealers Dealer of the Year award for the discovery of the Andover Lithium deposit and the subsequent $1.7 billion takeover of Azure. But that's not the only major award Tony has won. He was one of the key players in the discovery of the Cosmos nickel mine and won the AMEC Prospector of the Year award alongside Terry Grammer for Jubilee Mines in 2000. He's also been involved in discovering the Andover Nickel sulfide deposits in WA and several silver and base metal or precious metal and base metal projects in Mexico. Tony says he's now spending a bit more time at the beach, but he's still very active in the sector as a non-exec director of Solara Minerals and Caninda Resources. Hopefully we'll hear a little bit about those two companies and what he's up to now. Welcome, Tony. Over to you. We're very keen to hear about how you did it right from the horse's mouth.
Yes, thanks, John. And I've got a bit of a presentation here, which apparently, because it's all about me, there's a few photos of me that are in it. But so thanks for the opportunity to just to give a bit of an overview, a snapshot of what my career's been like. It's been a fantastic just over 40 years of so much fun and achievements as well, which has been really great. But I might start back at the beginning. I was Adelaide born and bred, went through school there, when I left school, I was looking for something to do, and I got offered a job as a field assistant on a mineral exploration geophysical crew operating in the outback of New South Wales and Queensland. So I did that for about a year, saved up a bunch of money, went travelling around Europe for another year, and then when I got back to Adelaide, I was looking for what's next in my life. So I signed up to do geology at the Flinders University in South Australia and did a 4-year degree there, finishing with an honours at the end of 1982. And in 1983, I was offered my first job. It was with BHP exploring for gold in the goldfields region around Kalgoorlie. So I moved to Perth and spent several years with BHP. Then I moved on to working with Sons of Gwalia in Leonora. I was also still exploring for gold around Leonora and then up around Kew and Meekatharra in the Murchison district as well. So there was a lot happening in those first few years. So BHP, then Sons of Gwalia. And then I ended up with a little bit of time on my hands between jobs, and I ended up going to a place called Mt Todd in the Northern Territory. And I was fortunate enough, I guess, to be able to drill the first dozen or so drill holes into the Todd gold deposit, just located just outside of Katherine in the Northern Territory. And that was in 1988. And then off doing other work elsewhere in Queensland and in the Pacific Islands. And then I got offered another job back with Zapopan, where I was the geologist involved with drilling the final few drill holes into the Mt Todd gold deposit. So there was a four-year hiatus, but I drilled the first holes and I drilled the last holes. And then the mine was put into development and production. It became one of Australia's largest gold mines by earth moving, by tons. It was absolutely enormous. Unfortunately, it didn't do as well as it should have because of the hardness of the rock and the low grade of the gold. But it was a very good discovery, and it's certainly a major gold repository at the moment, but albeit not in production at the moment. But there's a photo there of a very young Tony logging some drill core at Mt Todd back in the day. I think there's a few more grey hairs and a little bit more weight around the belly now, but that's the way it was.
Yeah.
Then I left Zapopan and Pegasus and joined Jubilee Mines in 1997. I was the geologist on staff. They called me the exploration manager, but I was literally the only geologist on staff. But I had a consulting contracting geologist called Terry Grammer working with me as well. And 6 months after I joined Jubilee, between Terry and myself, we were able to discover the Cosmos nickel deposit, which turned out to be the highest grade open pit nickel mine in the world. And then we found an extension to that underneath, which became Cosmos Deeps, and the Jubilee story really took off. And you can see there was a newspaper article showing me talking on the drill rig with the driller. There's a decided lack of personal protection equipment on there. No helmet, no nothing else. And I think I'm telling him how much I want. I want it to be that long. So that was in the west on the day, and as you can see the little share price graph there, they over a 4-day period, Jubilee just really took off. Because when prior to the discovery hole, we were trading around that sort of 15 to 20 cent mark per share, and a week later we're $1.50. So really quite amazing. And as a result of that discovery, Terry Grammer and myself were both awarded jointly the Prospector of the Year award in 2000. And that was the year that Jubilee actually put Cosmos into production. So that was an operating nickel mine at that stage. So from late 1997, when we discovered it, to early 2000, when it actually went into production, that was a very quick time frame. Pretty sure you wouldn't be able to do that these days. But we got it up and running. Great credit to Kerry Hermanis, the managing director and chairman of Jubilee. He really saw the vision of how to get this happening. And he was a great guy to work with. So that was in around about 1997, made the discovery. 2000, Prospector of the Year into production. 2003, I decided to leave Jubilee and went off and with a bunch of others set up a new company called Nickel Australia. And Nickel Australia was obviously exploring for nickel in Australia. We were hoping to replicate the Cosmos discovery. Unfortunately, we didn't have much success. So we decided, where else do we go and look for now? And so we actually moved over to Mexico, and the company spent about 15 years exploring in Mexico. It was quite amazing country to work in. Really, really enjoyable time. From a mineral prospectivity point of view, it's amazing. It is has such a high degree of mineral wealth in that area, in precious metal, base metals, and other commodities as well. But it's certainly very different from working in Australia, and you can see a little bit of there what it's like in one of the prospects that we were working on. It's in the outback of Mexico. It's still quite a rudimentary lifestyle at times, but Mexico is a great place to operate in, and we had a number of really good projects. This is myself with a mining engineer called Gary Layton. We were looking to put one of our projects into production. We got through to the feasibility study stage, and unfortunately at that stage the metals prices crashed in 2011, 2012, and we ended up not putting that mining into production, unfortunately. So we just carried on with the exploration over the coming years. As a geologist, as the leader of the company, it's not just about getting out in the field and working. It's also having to do the promotion side of things as well. So traveling the world, looking at projects, traveling the world, presenting to investors and the general public was a very important part of the role as well. And that in fact, from my point of view, it's quite an enjoyable thing to do. Being able to tell a good story and telling it well is very important from the company point of view. So then we moved into a new project called Acran in Mexico, in northern Mexico. There's a photograph of myself standing on top of one of the outcrops. In the background is the third largest copper mine in the world, run by Grupo Mexico. And it just shows you how well mineralized the district is. I mean, that is one of, as I said, the third largest copper mine in the world, and it's the second largest copper repository or copper resource in the world. It's simply amazing. And we were about 12 kilometers away, and we discovered underneath where I'm standing there, a very large outcropping silver deposit. It was called Mesa de Plata. We found it, but our geologists over there found it by just basically doing systematic sampling over our ground. And that's another shot of that same sort of area of Mesa de Plata in the foreground where I'm standing. And that's pretty typical of the areas that we're working in Mexico. And it was basically started off with just rock chip sampling and mapping, and that big white rock that you can see in the front of the photograph there, that's a piece of high-grade silver ore that was running several thousand grams per ton silver. And it was quite an amazing deposit sticking out of the ground on top of a hill, and had never, ever been found, even though there was a road that ran right next to it, a fairly major road. So it is still possible to find good deposits in parts of the world where things remain undiscovered at surface. So that was 2016. That was called the Mesa de Plata silver deposit, called the Table of Silver. And as a result of that, the company and myself were awarded the Explorer of the Year for Mexico in 2018 for the discovery of the Mesa de Plata silver deposit. Unfortunately, once again, the price of silver started to go right down then, and we were unable to develop that past the pre-feasibility study stage. And that project or that deposit is still sitting there unexploited at this stage. But then in that 2020, as we all know, we had COVID come in, and we found that it was at that stage, it was just too difficult to try and work in Mexico, particularly managing it from Perth. Couldn't travel. The people in Mexico were in lockdown as well, so there was no exploration activities allowed. So we decided that we needed to look for a new project, and that we would sell the Mexican assets. We did sell them about 2 years later to a Canadian-American junior company, and those assets are now in their hands. And our focus came back to Australia, particularly into Western Australia. And I said, okay, well, we can't travel anywhere to do our exploration except in Western Australia. So what are we going to do, and where do we find a project? So who has projects in Western Australia? And one of the most well-known prospectors and mine finders is Mark Creasey. And I've known Mark for many, many years, and I rang him up and I said, oh, do you happen to have any projects in Western Australia? And he said, oh, what sort are you looking for? And I said, oh, precious and base metals. And he said, well, I've got this Andover Nickel project located just outside of Karratha, and I've also got 2 or 3 other gold projects, which are like real moose pasture in the back blocks of the Pilbara. So we went up to the outcrop, went up to the Andover project and had a look around and found these outcropping nickel and copper gossans, very high grades at surface. And so we closed the deal with Mark Creasey in about July of 2020. But we were drilling on the ground in September, October 2020, and underneath these gossans, and we had a really good nickel sulfide discovery. And that's a photo of some of the drill core that we got from one of the early holes, massive nickel sulfides. And in fact, we found 2 deposits. One was called Andover, one we called Ridgeline. And those 2 nickel sulfide deposits remain there to this day. And they are, at some stage, I'm sure they will be exploited. But around about 2022, the lithium boom, the second lithium boom, started off again. And we talked to amongst ourselves, and I asked the geologists, is there any potential for pegmatites and lithium on our ground at Andover? And they went out there and started looking. And when you're out there looking in the ground, I just got a photograph on the left-hand side there. This was taken in summer up there. Outside temperature outside of the vehicle was 50 degrees. And the guys are out there rock chip sampling, surface sampling, drilling in temperatures like that. So it's not exactly pleasant conditions up there. And the team that we had in place did a really good job of working their way through those sort of difficult conditions. And then we did actually identify some potential for pegmatites that could host lithium. So we started drilling them, and on the left-hand side there is a photograph of one of the early drill hole, which contained spodumene, which is the white mineral you can see in there, with quartz, which is the grey. And that was the first drill hole that we put into one of the pegmatites, and it had significant amount of lithium-rich mineralization within it, and that was the discovery hole. And in the other photograph there, I'm with Graham Lever, Azure's exploration manager, who built a team initially based upon the nickel exploration, and from 2020 through to 2022, and then we expanded it with the discovery of the lithium, and he built an amazing team of really enthusiastic and really smart geologists who were incredibly talented and also did really well on their exploration, particularly on the mapping and sampling of the surface pegmatites and then drilling them out. And it was a really great job and a credit to the entire exploration team. So then around about 2023 up at Diggers and Dealers, we started to put out some of the early stage drill hole information, drill hole results that we got from Andover. And you can see on the left-hand side there, one of the intersections that we put out. And there's, a 200-meter intersection of 1.4% lithium, probably the biggest and best lithium drill intersection in Australia to that time. And then Azure had a few more like that, or even better than that, over the following months. As you can see on the right-hand side, the news was starting to get out into the public, particularly being publicised in some of the media. And there were a lot of comments about the lucky Mark Creasey, and here he goes again. And Mark is very happy with that as well. And then we just happened to we also won another award at that Diggers as one of the companies with the biggest share price appreciation over a certain period of time. So thanks to Deloitte for awarding Azure with that as well. And so this was quite an amazing amount of drilling that was going on. The share price really started to skyrocket, and you can see that share price graph on the left-hand side. Firstly, on the left-hand, there was a bit of a kick up when we discovered the nickel sulfides, but then it died back down again. And then when we were onto the lithium, the discovery in sort of mid to late 2023, and the share price really took off. We had the takeover offer was initially made by SQM in September of 2023. And then we had a number of other companies, including Hancock Prospecting, buy shares on market. And then there was a joint takeover bid launched by Hancock and SQM in December 2023, which we accepted. And the takeover was completed in May of 2024. So a very fast transaction that only took about 6 months to do, and probably 12 months from discovery to being taken over is quite amazing. And at that time, and to this day, there has been no public release of the mineral resource for the Andover lithium deposit. And because Azure is now a private company owned by SQM and Hancock, there's unlikely to be a release of the mineral resource anytime soon. But for a company that had a market cap when I initially did the deal with Mark Creasey of about $10 or $12 million to being taken over for $1.7 billion, and that's for a company that did not even have a mineral resource in the public domain, that's an amazing turnaround and uplift for the company. And as you mentioned, John, with your fund, all the shareholders who are in there got an incredible benefit on the back of it. And then, mid last year at the Diggers and Dealers Forum, Azure Minerals was awarded the Dealer of the Year award for the takeover, and it's a great recognition for the company and for all the people that really contributed to it. So it's been a fantastic ride over the last 40 years, and a lot of success along the way, and I've had a great time.
Fantastic, Tony. I just love that share price chart. No, I remember, I think, talking to you and Brett at the RIU Explorers Conference in Frio, early 2023. You had a nice piece of lithium spodumene pegmatite there at the booth, and it was very impressive. But I don't think anyone really realized then exactly, what it was going to become. It was, and you didn't have any results at that point. But yeah, fortunately, we were. The Lower Resources Fund became shareholders probably, after the initial nickel drilling and held on. So just a couple of questions about, more generally about exploration. In your career, have there been any particular people that have formed your approach to exploration? If so, what were their sort of philosophies that got passed on to you as to how to have success in exploration?
Well, that's over such a long period of time, 40 years. I've obviously interacted with a lot of people. Initially, my bosses in the early days, and then more recently, my peers. So it's very difficult to pinpoint any one particular person. I've had good success, and some of those successful discoveries have been me personally, but most of the time it's been the teams that I've led, and it's all about getting good people to work with you. Not just for you, but with you. And so it's a very collaborative approach. And you want smart geologists, you want innovative ones, you want ones that are entrepreneurial and think outside the square. not just box tickers. And along the way, I've had many geologists work for me who have been really, really outstanding explorationists, because being a geologist is not the same as being a discoverer. Being a discoverer is a geologist, but someone who can really think laterally and find things that other people have walked past. The Jubilee Mines discovery at Cosmos, that was a nickel sulfide body that was sticking out of the ground and had been drilled next to it by other companies in previous years, and they had no idea what they were standing on top of or next to. And then Terry and myself were able to think a little laterally and had that success. It's the same with the Andover Lithium. Those pegmatites have been sticking out of the ground for millions of years. No one had really recognised their significance, even though they were in the Western Australian mining literature and books, that they were there and that there was lithium in them. No one had really done anything. No one had approached Mark Creasey about it. So once again, it was having good people who could think laterally and get out there and make discoveries. So yeah, long-winded answer, John. I'm sorry, but I don't want to name any particular names other than that a lot of the people I've worked with have been great people.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Any particular lessons that you've learned along the way? Is success more about area selection, going to the right? I can't find it if it's not there, obviously. Any key elements that you would sort of say, we're not going to do that because it doesn't have a couple of key elements to it?
Oh, absolutely. There's many different ways of looking at it. Firstly, perseverance is very important, so that you have a good project or a project that you believe in and you need to persevere with it. But also at some stage, you've got to realize if I'm not having success, I should cut my losses and move on. So that's a fine balancing act between working that out. And I've not always got it right by any means, but we've had success along the way because in some cases we've had perseverance and really worked hard at trying to understand the geology and then understand what was controlling the mineralization, and other ones where it's quite possible that we let projects go where other people have found them since then. So that's just the nature of the beast when you're doing exploration. Yep. But it's really, in some ways, I guess one of the gifts that I've got is being able to look at projects and seeing if I believe that they have some potential. And then you've got to convince the fund managers or the board and that will you back them. And so a good management is important. Good budgets are important. Support from the board level is very important as well. If you've got all of those and you've got good people, just a touch of good luck and you're onto a big one.
And maybe just quickly in a minute get on to what you're doing at the moment. But last sort of question about Andover. You did a deal at either end of the project with a couple of the richest people in the country. Mark Creasey, you did a deal to get into the project, and then Gina Reinhardt and Hancock to sell it. You obviously got some good skills in terms of corporate M&A. How did you do it? It's a remarkable story.
Well, Mark Creasey is a fascinating chap. He's obviously incredibly successful in what he's done over probably 50 years. I met him back in the Jubilee days when we had the Cosmos discovery, and we sort of kept in touch along the way. And he was an initial investor into Azure Minerals and topped up along the way when we made, for example, the silver discovery and things like that. So when I reached out to him, it helped knowing him. He's quite unique in the way he does his business and his negotiations, but which is fine because I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that most ground that he has good potential because he has an eye for it. So it was really good working with Mark, and to this day I still drop around and see him every now and again and have a beer and have a chat. With the Hancock people, well, I never actually met Gina Reinhardt or spoke with her, so I really can't say what she was like to deal with. But the people that worked for her, the senior management underneath her, were very, very professional and great to work with, and as were the SQM senior people as well. So both SQM and Hancock approached this business arrangement, the takeover with us, in a very professional manner, and it was a pleasure to work with them. Everything moved so quickly. We didn't put out our first drill hole release until May of 2023, and the takeover deal was signed in December of 2023. So all over and done with in a few months.
Yeah, remarkable. Quickly, what are you up to at the moment? I know you've taken on a couple of non-exec director positions in a few interesting companies.
That's right. I decided that I left Azure back in August of last year, and have been having some holidays and a bit of downtime since then, which has been welcome. But I don't want to do nothing going forward, and I do believe I've got a skill set that I can continue to offer back into the industry. So rather than joining large established companies with big projects, I was looking for some more junior end of the market, smaller companies which were attractive, had good people working for them, maybe good projects, and had the ability to be entrepreneurial and innovative in what they were doing. And so I've joined the board of two of them. One of them is called Solara Minerals. Solara used to be called Lycaon, but it changed its name a few months ago. And Solara Minerals is a shell, basically. It's a very small board of just the three of us. It's a small share base with less than 60 million shares, but it's got $4 million in cash. And it's looking for the right sort of project in Western Australia in particular, or maybe Australia on a wider, if we look wider. Mainly, we're looking at base metals and precious metals, but in particular, copper and gold. The company has been doing due diligence on a number of different assets that have been offered to us or we've identified over the last few months. And we're very happy with where the way the due diligence is going on one of those at the moment. And if that comes to fruition to our satisfaction, then there'll be an acquisition announced sometime in the near future. I really like the idea of brand new company and getting a brand new project and really running with it. The other one is Caninda Resources, and Caninda is an underappreciated Queensland-focused copper and gold explorer based out of Brisbane. It's got its copper and gold project. It's a porphyry copper model located just inland from Gladstone in central Queensland. The company's had the project for a few years now, and in that time has been able to treble the resource from an initial 5 million tonnes up to last year announcing a nearly 15 million tonne resource grading just over 1% copper equivalent. And they've been doing a lot more drilling since then, and also a lot more generative work on the ground they've got. And with hiring a really exceptionally good exploration manager who's come out of Newmont and Newcrest, who really understands porphyry coppers, this chap has identified plenty of really good potential at Caninda, and drilling will be continuing going forward for this year. And I'm really excited about that. I think that Caninda is sitting on the top of something that could be one of Australia's great recent copper and gold discoveries. It's looking really prospective.
I've got to take a bit of a closer look. And there's another one that I think we're both shareholders in, or Lowell and yourself, Inca Minerals, also in Queensland, with some pretty interesting drilling about to start in terms of antimony and gold.
Yes, it's a project that was acquired through the takeover of a private company, and Inca completed that transaction of the takeover a few weeks ago. And on the ground out there, there's and preface this by saying I've not been on the ground to see it in particular, but I know some geologists that who have talked to me about it. It's in the outback of the northern part of Cape York Peninsula, inland from Cairns or Port Douglas. It's not quite as nice as that sounds because it's on the other side of the range, getting out towards the Gulf of Carpentaria. But there's a number of ranges of hills out there, and those hills are usually built up around veins, quartz veins that contain a lot of high-grade gold and also antimony mineralization. There's a lot of old fossicking mine pits out there, probably done back in the 1880s, 1890s by perhaps the Chinese, who are very active in that area. That whole sequence of rocks through there is heavily mineralized, and there are further afield operating mines. But this is an area that's never been drilled. It looks really prospective. I guess the proof is in the pudding with that first round of drilling that's going to be coming up in a couple of months' time. But when you're getting gold grades there at a sort of 30 to 60 grams per tonne, or you're getting antimony grades with stibnite in the core running up to 20, 30, 40% antimony, those numbers are really high, and those high grades are very attractive.
Yep. Yeah, no, it looks very interesting what what there is at surface. So fingers crossed the drilling can hit some of those high grades, and it should be good. All right, thank you, Tony. Look, just going to turn to the next segment quickly. For the forward forecast section, we've been talking about gold, and it's very topical at the moment. So that's the focus of this month's forward forecast, and we'll get Tony perhaps to give his views on the gold market. But just a couple of slides. The gold market is at record highs, and even in real terms, in terms of US dollars, it's at record highs. Obviously, the new administration in the US has really kicked along the gold price, but it's a powerful move that started, probably 2.5, 3 years ago In particular, I think the Ukraine war and sanctioning of Russian assets, the confiscation of Russian assets in particular, has really driven a move of de-dollarization. And we've certainly seen that from the Chinese central bank. So in terms of the run that we've seen in gold, currently the gold price is up around 111% since 2022. But that's, over the last 50 years, that's sort of a mid-sized, in percentage terms anyway, a mid-sized gold bull run. We can certainly see gold, in terms of history, go much further in terms of how big a bull run can be. Really, it's a de-dollarization theme. You can see gold in brown or yellow there. You can also see silver, which is normally more volatile than gold, but it certainly hasn't been quite as reactive to current economic and geopolitical situations as gold. And I think that is really due to central banks buying gold rather than buying silver. So you can see this chart, as at the end of last year, gold made up, over 20% of global monetary reserves among central banks. US dollar still got the lion's share at 44.5%, but gold is a growing and very important part of central bank reserves around the world. And you can see this is something that's been happening for well over a decade. Central bank gold buying has been net positive since around 2010, and the Chinese central bank has been key to that. And at the same time, you've seen China selling some of its US Treasury holdings and putting some of that money into gold. So that's not something that is related to the current tariffs out of the US, although that certainly is a factor that's boosting gold price to record levels. The other main institutional buyer of gold is gold ETFs. And you can see that gold ETFs have significantly holding historically at the moment, but it's not quite back at the levels sort of around 2020. So 5 years ago, ETFs actually held more gold than they do today, even though the gold price is much higher than it was back then. Having said all that, the ratios for gold are certainly historically very high. The gold-silver ratio is at 100 to 1, where more typically it might be at 65 to 1. Similar for the gold oil ratio, the Dow gold ratio. Gold is historically high, but we think that for these macro factors that there's some really strong fundamentals underpinning the gold price. And I think, we saw the gold price go to US $3,500 an ounce when Trump was talking about wanting to sack Jerome Powell from the Federal Reserve a week or so ago, and that the markets really got spooked that the independence of the US central bank would be compromised if that happened. Now, Trump's resolved from that, but I think people forget that Powell's term will be up in 2026, next year. It's very soon. And Trump will have the opportunity to put in a new chairman of the Federal Reserve who may be someone who is much more amenable to what Trump wants to happen with interest rates. And if that were the case, I think that could be even more positive for gold. This is perhaps the money slide. You can see for equities, for gold miners, that the margins have just opened up fantastically. I think one of our investment committee members did the sums yesterday that of the 35 odd gold miners listed in Australia, they're sitting on about $7.5 billion of cash as a result of this fantastic price, and cost escalation in terms of operations has definitely moderated. And this chart just shows that while equity prices have moved somewhat, they haven't really moved in line with the gold price. So we think there's still some catch up to do. Valuations of companies are still being valued on a much lower gold price, much more conservative valuations. So there's definitely upside in equities. And that's the senior gold miners. And then typically you would expect to see a trickle down effect of valuations move down as M&A happens. And M&A is really starting to gather some pace. There's just a few of the transactions that we've seen amongst listed gold companies in Australia over the last 6 months there. Very, very quickly, just on copper, it is a bit of a confused scene, but certainly you are seeing the solid charts there are visible copper inventories on global exchanges, and you can see that they are coming down. And certainly in Shanghai, partly as a result of tariffs and copper moving to the US, the Shanghai Futures Exchange copper warehouses are in danger of being empty at the moment in terms of copper. So that's a positive sign for the Chinese economy, which consumes well over 50% of copper demand. I'll leave it there and we'll turn over to some audience questions. And thanks for sending those in. Tony, first question from a tech-based entrepreneur. Which part of the industry should my focus best be spent on problem solving? Where can innovation and the application of new tech have the most impact for mining companies? And I guess exploration companies as well, which is probably more your focus.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that AI is becoming more and more important, and I know that there are a lot of explorers now that are tending to employ AI as their tech focus going forward, and it has a lot to that appeals to it, that appeals to us for it. It's a technology that is in its infancy, but there is so much information out there that an AI system could employ to assist with exploration, just identifying areas that have been looked at in the past but overlooked more recently. And I know that is happening out there. So from a tech entrepreneurial point of view, it's the AI space I'll be focused on.
Thank you. Yep, I know it's definitely probably in all sectors, but in mineral exploration, it's definitely a growing application. Next question. What happened to Azure's Mexican silver mines?
We sold them in 2022 to a Canadian-American junior company that is currently doing exploration on them and have not yet been taken into production.
Okay. But it sounds like, is it the Mesa de Plata? That sounds like a fantastic deposit. It's going to go into production at some stage.
It will some stage, yes, for sure. It sits on top of a hill. The strip ratio is virtually zero. It's very high-grade silver that processes very nicely. So at some stage, I'm sure it will become an operating mine.
Yeah, good. Okay. Last question from Jimmy Nicolau here in Melbourne. We've got another one. Jimmy asked to Tony, congrats on the amazing career to date. What's your current take on the lithium market? Is the worst/lows behind us?
Wow. We had a lithium boom in 2017 to 2019, and then it crashed, and then it had another boom in that 22 to 23 period, and then it's crashed. Is it likely to run again? Well, I'm no seer and I don't have a crystal ball, so I think not for a while. I think that there's a lot of lithium that's been discovered and it's available for exploitation in the hard rock space here in Western Australia. And there's also obviously all the brines that are in South America as well. I think the supply and the potential supply for lithium is very strong, and so that'll keep a downward pressure on prices going forward.
Yep. Yeah, certainly we've seen the price pull back significantly, and it continues to be weak. Okay, last one. This is a bit of an easy one. Tony, what things do you enjoy about the exploration industry most? Yeah.
Freedom, the ability to go out there and into the outback or into areas where there is mineral potential away from civilization, and then being able to use your own common sense and your own technical abilities to go and explore and find things. It's getting away from the office. Now, the first 20 years of my career, all geologists spent time on the ground. Now most geologists spend time in the office looking at their computers. So there's got to be some halfway house between the two of them. But for me, geology and exploration, it was all about getting away from the office and getting out in the bush and making discoveries. Yeah,
I think all geos like to crack rocks. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time, but thank you so much, Tony, for being our guest and all your interesting insights. I really enjoyed, your comments about, the ingredients for success in exploration and particularly, talking about thinking laterally and seeing things that other people haven't seen before. Thank you to all our attendees. Thank you to our organisers, Boyd Peters and Bridget Tompkins, for putting the webinar together as ever. There is a poll if attendees feel as though you'd like to give some quick feedback. This webinar we put up on YouTube, so if the YouTube audience has any questions, please email them through. Finally, our next webinar is now set, and our guest will be Paul Roberts, who's formerly of Predictive Discovery, and is going to be talking about the Bankan gold discovery in Guinea. Thank you very much to everyone for attending, and in particular, thanks Tony, for discussing your fantastic career.
Thanks, John. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a great time over the last 40 years, and long may it continue.
Indeed. Hear, hear.